Mary Stephenson Cassatt was born on May 22nd in 1844 and was an American painter and printmaker. She is believed to have been born in what is now present-day Pittsburgh and lived a somewhat comfortable life. Her parents, Robert Simpson Cassatt and Catherine Kellos Johnston, both came from well-off lineages. At age 6, she began going to school. After some time, she began to travel to further her education. Cassatt spent 5 years in Europe, and that is where she first started taking lessons in art and music. The Paris World Fair in 1855 is most likely where she was exposed to French artists Ingres, Delacroix, Corot, and Courbet. Despite the fact that her family protested her making painting a career, Cassatt started studying at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts in Philadelphia at the early age of 15. Some portion of her parents' anxiety may have been Cassatt's openness to women's activism and the overwhelming portion of male students. Only about 20% of the students were female. In spite of the fact that most were not keen on making a profession of art, they saw art as a valid means of achievement and recognition and a socially important ability. But nevertheless, Cassatt was resolved to turn into a professional artist. Around when 1866 was coming to a close, she joined a canvas class instructed by Charles Joshua Chaplin, a prominent genre artist. In 1868, Cassatt additionally worked with artist Thomas Couture, whose subjects were, for the most part, heartfelt and metropolitan. On excursions to the open country, the understudies drew from life, especially the laborers and workers approaching their everyday exercises. In 1868, one of her works of art, a mandolin player, was acknowledged by the determined jury for the Paris Salon. Cassatt later returned to the United States in the summer of 1870, moving back in with her family. At this time, she has 2 paintings in a New York gallery. Many complimented her work, but none would take the bait. She wrote in a letter in July 1871, "I have given up my studio and torn up my father's portrait, and have not touched a brush for 6 weeks, nor ever will again until I see some prospect of getting back to Europe. I am very anxious to go out west next fall and get some employment, but I have not yet decided where." She ended up going to Chicago to take a chance, however lost a portion of her initial works of art in the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. A while later, her work pulled in the consideration of the Archbishop of Pittsburgh, who authorized her to paint 2 duplicates of compositions by Correggio in Parma, Italy. This propelled her forward to continue painting. Her painting, 2 women throwing flowers during Carnival, was highly regarded in the Salon of 1872 and was purchased. In 1874, Cassatt made the decision to move to France permanently. According to Mary Cassatt's biography, Cassatt saw that the works by female artists were often dismissed with contempt unless the artist had a friend or protector on the jury, and she would not flirt with the jurors to curry favor. Her cynicism grew when one of the 2 pictures she submitted to the 1875 Salon was refused by the jury, only to be accepted the following year after she darkened the background. Cassatt concluded that she expected to move away from classification canvases and onto more stylish subjects, to draw in representational commissions from American societies abroad. However, this did not flourish how she hoped. In 1877, both her entrances were dismissed, and for a very long time she had no works in the Salon. In 1877, Cassatt's parents and her sister Lydia connected with her in Paris. Lydia, who was frequently painted by her sister, suffered from recurrent bouts of illness, and her death left Cassatt temporarily unable to work. She showed pieces in the Impressionist exhibitions that continued in 1880 and 1881, and she stayed a functioning individual in the Impressionist circle until 1886. In 1886, Cassatt gave 2 artworks to the principal Impressionist presentation in the United States, coronated by art seller Paul Durand-Ruel. Cassatt's style, at this point, developed, and she moved away from Impressionism to a less difficult, more direct methodology. She started to display her works in New York exhibitions as well. At this point, Cassatt did not recognize herself with any movement and explored different avenues regarding the assortment of methods. In 1891, she displayed a progression of profoundly unique colored prints, including woman bathing and coiffure. Cassatt felt enlivened by the Japanese experts who appeared in the Paris Salon the previous year. She was pulled into the straightforwardness and lucidity of Japanese art, and the handy utilization of squares of shading. In her interpretation, she utilized fundamentally light, fragile pastel tones, and stayed away from darks and blacks, which some Impressionists considered a prohibited shading. The 1890s were Cassatt's busiest and most creative time, and with the turn of the century, she filled in as a guide to a few significant art collectors and specified that they ultimately gave their buys to the American art exhibition halls and museums. An expanding wistfulness is clear in her work of the 1900s. Her work was mainstream with people in general and the pundits. However, she was no longer doing anything visionary and innovative, and her Impressionist partners who once gave her incitement and analysis were vanishing. After a trip to Egypt, Cassatt was left labored and strained. And in 1911, Mary Cassatt was diagnosed with diabetes, rheumatism, neuralgia, and cataracts. But she didn't slow down until 1914, when she had to quit painting as she turned out to be partially visually impaired. Regardless, she took up the Reason for Ladies testimony, and in 1915, she showed 18 works in a presentation supporting the development. In acknowledgement of her commitments to human expression, France granted her the Lion Jeune, and on June 14, 1926, at Chateau de Buffon, Mary Stevenson Cassatt passed away and was covered in the family vault in France. There is no doubt that Mary Cassatt could be considered one of the most influential American female artists, and her work is still highly praised today.